kind of a rainy day, and I think I'm gonna make some chicken noodle soup for dinner. So I'm on my way to the supermarket. I'm not gonna make it from scratch where you boil a whole chicken. I'm gonna do my kind of shortcut version where I buy broth and I buy a rotisserie chicken. Sometimes this supermarket we go to has the chicken already cut up, which is really nice, but they don't always have it. But if not, I will cut up a rotisserie chicken. It'll make the cats very happy. And I never know whether to buy regular chicken broth or low sodium chicken broth, because sometimes if I buy low sodium, it doesn't have any flavor. Sometimes if I buy regular, it's too salty. So I'm probably gonna buy one of each and mix them together, and maybe we'll get the right balance. And we'll get some vegetables, and I'll show you how I make it. Come on. Today I'm going to make some candles for gifts. Now I have this wonderful little machine called Chandler and Me, and it comes with this little pot that you put on top. I'm not going to put it on because as soon as you put it on, it starts it. But what you do is you put your soy wax in here. This is only appropriate for soy wax. You can't use other kinds of wax in here. You put it in here, you put it on top, and it starts going through a process here of melting the wax, and then as it progresses here, it'll come to a point here where it will flash, and it'll tell you that's when you put your fragrance in if you want to add fragrance. And then it'll keep going, mixing, 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 cooling down a little bit, and then when it gets to the end, it tells you that it's ready to pour. Here is my kitchen table with all of my supplies laid out. I'm not sure how many candles I'm going to make today, but I usually get all of my supplies from Candle Science. You can find them online as candlescience.com. They sell the wax and the wicks, and they have a little calculator on there to tell you what wax and wick is appropriate for what container, because you can't use just any wick in any container. It has to be the proper one or it won't burn down correctly. And you can get a bunch of fragrances on there that are appropriate for candles. I have them all laid out here. I haven't decided yet what I'm going to use. So this little machine that I have will make one candle if it's a large candle, or if you're making smaller candles, it might only make about 3. So it's really kind of for personal use. If you wanted to make candles to sell, you're probably going to want to make a larger quantity at a time. So you can buy something like this that you can use on a hot plate or on your stove. As long as it's an electric stove, you don't want to put a flame under that. But now I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. So here are some that I already made, and I made labels for. So I have this orange spice candle. And I have one called Sweater Weather. I don't know if you can see there's a snowflake on there. It's not really picking up. And then I have some here that I haven't labeled yet that are Christmas scents. And these are what the tins look like when they're empty. So you can see there's a little round piece in there, sort of like a target of where you're going to put your wick. So what I do is I have these wicks that are appropriate for this size tin. And I have little glue dots. And I'm going to put a little glue dot on the bottom of these wicks, and then I'm going to press it into the bottom of the container here so that it sticks. And then when you fill it up with wax, you can just put one of these little guys on top of it like this, and you can push the wax into that little divot so that it keeps the wick straight, and it makes a nice perfect candle. And these are nice little tins because these are 6-ounce tins because they come with lids, which is always nice. And they also have little feet on the bottom. You can see that separately there, so that they don't sit flat on your table, so they don't make the surface underneath hot, which I think is really nice. Now I also bought this in the Christmas tree store. It's a cute little Parisian teacup and saucer set. And I'm going to press a wick into the bottom of this and also make this a candle to give as a gift for someone. So I think it'll be fun. I haven't decided exactly what fragrances I'm going to use. I'll do that along the way. For fragrance, you want to use these little droppers that can pull it out of the bottle and you can squirt it into the melted wax. And I have a whole bunch of them here. You can just, they're disposable if you want to use them. Sometimes if I'm using one particular fragrance and I haven't emptied the bottle out yet, I'll put it in a baggie like this and I'll put the dropper in there. They're very inexpensive, but I just don't like to be wasteful. So if I've used it once for one, like for lavender, for example, you don't want to use it again for a different fragrance, but I'll package it up with my lavender fragrance and then I know that that's the right tube to use again. So here we go. So the soy wax I buy comes in little shaved pellets like this. It makes it easier for it to melt down. So if you buy a big brick of wax, you're going to have to do that yourself, but it's much easier to buy it this way. So this little machine works by, as soon as I put this on, the weight of it is going to start it, see? And then it's just going to blink and travel along this line and tell me what to do. I don't have a lot of wax in here, but even so, when this starts to melt down, it's not going to take up much room. So as it gets a little lower, I'm going to add more wax inside this container. While the wax is melting, I've been going through my fragrances. So I think for the teacup, I'm going to use this one called Frosted Snowdrops. It's just a nice Christmassy fragrance. Has a sort of a light vanilla flavor to it. I also have this one that is a dupe of Diptyque's Fig. I'm going to make some of the tins out of that. And then I'm going to make one for myself, and I think I'm going to use this Burgundy Rose. You can get all kinds of wax available, like beeswax candles are really nice to use, but you cannot use it in this little machine. Ask me how I know. I did try it once and it got all gunked up. The machine is only appropriate for soy wax. So if you want to make the beeswax candle, you have to melt it separately on your stove. So this is what they look like when they're finished. This is one of the Christmas ones I made before. So after it completely hardens, you can then snip the wick to about 1/4 of an inch. The wax is melting. See, it's progressing through the stages here. When it gets to here is when we add our fragrance. So now it's telling me it's time to add the fragrance. So I'm going to start with the Fig, because it's the lightest of the fragrances. I'm going to press that button and it's just going to mix it in good. This also helps it to not be too hot, because some fragrances are fragile, and if the heat is too high, they could dissipate. So it's hard to tell whether you've added enough, because there are two ways that you can smell a candle. When they're not burnt and you just pick it up and you smell it before you light it, you want to have a nice pleasant fragrance. So if you're going to sell these, you want people to be able to know what it's going to smell like. But then there's also when it is actually burning, what the strength of the scent is. So this Diptyque fragrance smells very light to me, so I'm going to let this mix and I'm going to give it a sniff, see if I think it's strong enough. I might add a little more, and then at that point I'll just add it with a dropper, like a little bit at a time until I get it to where, you know, I'm just kind of eyeballing it, or noseballing it, I guess would be the term. So I am adding a little bit more as it stirs. And now it'll stir a little at a time instead of constantly. Now at this point it's easy to get a little impatient because the wax is melted, the fragrance is in, and you're like, okay, I want to pour. But don't be tempted to do it too soon. Wait until this gets all the way over to the side, because it's actually cooling it down a little bit. You don't want to pour it when it's too hot, because it could loosen up your wick and you don't want your wick floating off. I'm trying to make this one without removing the wrapping. So I did manage to sneak a little wick in there. And I'm hoping I'll be able to pour the candle in here too without messing up the pretty bow. Okay, it's telling us we are ready to pour. So as soon as you lift this, it'll stop. Now when you pour, you want to pour sort of short-handedly, because if you're going to try to dribble it in, you're going to spill it. So be confident when you pour, but don't pour it directly onto the wick. I have a tiny bit left over. Actually, I can probably make 3 candles out of this, so why waste it? A little half a candle. Well, it almost got there. Keep that one for myself. So now this is hot, remember, but you want to clean it out. Let's get every little dribble that we can. That little round piece on the bottom that spins comes out. You can clean that off, and we're going to just wipe it out with some paper towels. I'm going to let it cool a little bit, but not till the wax solidifies. But I just don't want to burn myself. And you can see I put the little wick holders on here so that the wick stands up straight in the center of the candle. This one came a little loose on me. Fortunately, this is the one I'm keeping for myself, and I managed to get it back into place. It'll be fine once it solidifies. So here we are. I'm starting batch number 2. I cleaned this out, made sure it was completely dry, and I poured a new batch of wax in here. Now if you have any wax left over, like say I had too much to pour into these other candles, do not be tempted to pour it down the sink, because you will just ruin your plumbing. Because wax solidifies, and just, that would be a big old mess. So what I normally do is I either pour it, if it's a really tiny bit, I'll pour it into some paper towels and I'll just put it in the trash. If I have too much, I might save it for another time, put it in a little container where I can keep it. But if you really just want to dispose of it, I would just put it in a little like disposable container and just throw it into the trash can, but do not put it down the sink. I untied the bow on this so that I could make it easier to hold that wick up straight. I hope it's not a bad idea to try to keep all this wrapping on while I'm pouring this, but we'll see. It's ready for the fragrance. So this bottle doesn't look the type to pour easily, so I'm going to do this with the dropper. Well, if you decide you want to sell your candles, you're going to have to put a warning label on them. These go on the bottom of the tin. This is a bigger size that I have for a bigger candle. I also have smaller ones, and it just warns people how to burn it correctly, gives safety instructions, how to trim the wick, and all that kind of stuff. It's very important if you want to sell your candles to label properly. And the candle I'm making for myself, I'm going to use this big glass container. I really like the way these look when they're done, because they have a straight side up and down. Now you have to be careful with these. If they're cold, when you pour the wax in, it can separate from the side a little bit. So you want to make sure they're a tiny bit warm. So what I'm going to do is just warm it up a little bit. I'm going to put it on a tray in the oven, with the oven really, really low. I just want it to not be cold. Just want it to be slightly above room temperature. Here are all of our candles poured. You can see some of the smaller ones are already starting to solidify. They'll turn white when they're completely done. It'll take a few hours. Here's the rose one. You can see it looks pretty. You could add some color to these if you wanted to. They sell little wax melts that you can add color to your candles. I just like to keep them white. Here's the one in the teacup. See if I can focus on that. I think that'll make a nice gift, and you can see the smaller ones are already starting to solidify. For dinner we're making Pasta Norma, which is eggplant with tomatoes and some garlic. Now normally you would slice the eggplant and fry it, but we're going to slice it up, and we're going to slice up these tomatoes, and we're going to put these garlic cloves with the paper on, all on a roasting sheet, and we're going to roast everything in the oven, and then we're going to make the sauce out of that. Here we go. We've cut the eggplant into chunks, and we've quartered the tomatoes. We also have the garlic in the middle here. We didn't bother taking the paper off because we're going to put this in a 400-degree oven for about 40 minutes. We tossed everything very generously with olive oil, and we generously sprinkled salt all over everything and also black pepper. Here we are about 30 minutes in. Everything is looking beautiful, and I just wanted to show you that underneath the tomatoes, before we put it in the oven, we put a few sprigs of marjoram for some added flavor. We have some rigatoni in to boil. We just grated some fontina cheese that we're going to add to the recipe. We're removing the marjoram. It's done its job, giving us some flavor. And then we're going to transfer these tomatoes and the garlic, which are still in their papers. We're going to squirt them out of their papers to a skillet. We're taking the eggplant and putting it into a separate bowl. So we have the tomatoes and the garlic in a skillet now, and we're just mashing them up a little with a potato masher. We're going to add some pasta water to the tomato mixture to make it more saucy. A little at a time. And now we're adding the eggplant. And you want to keep the skin on because a lot of the nutrition is in the purple skin. Maybe add a little more pasta water at this point. Makes a nice silky sauce. And then we're just going to add the pasta to this dish and toss it all together and cook it all together for a few minutes just so all the flavors meld. Adding the cooked rigatoni and some of the fontina cheese. I'm not going to add all of that cheese, just till we get the right consistency. Toss it all together. We added a shake of red pepper flake, so we're just going to let this warm up together and then serve it up. It looks so good. So I'm just sitting here writing out my Christmas cards for the year. A little late. But I hate when I see a name on my list that has fallen off this year, because I had a good friend who passed away this year and I saw her address on my list and it just made me sad. But we also added a new baby to the family this year, so I guess it all balances out in the end, right? So let's just take a moment to think of our absent friends and all the new people that we're going to meet in the new year. And let's not be sad. Let's be filled with joy, because it's Christmas. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the recipes and making candles with me. So don't forget, there will be one more Vlogmas before Christmas, and we'll do some more recipes, and we're going to make some soap, and we'll see what else we can get up to. I'll see you then.